The bridge of the relentless dawn was quiet, except for the soft hum of machines. Captain Jack Harmon stood near the main window, watching the stars pass by like tiny white dots against endless black. He was a tall man with gray hair at his temples and tired eyes that had seen too many battles. But his back was straight, and his voice was steady when he gave orders. "How long until we reach the Sorrel Nebula?" he asked. Lieutenant Katie Brennan looked up from her console. She was young, barely 30, with sharp brown eyes and short dark hair. She was the best tactical officer Harmon had ever worked with. 14 hours at current speed, Captain. Harmon nodded. They were heading to help the Karathi Empire defend their territory against the Varax Dominion. The Varax were insect-like creatures that moved from world to world, eating everything in their path. They had already destroyed dozens of civilizations. Now they were coming for the Galactic Coalition. The Karathi had never asked for human help before. They were a proud species, 7 feet tall with shining scales covering their bodies. They lived for hundreds of years and considered humans to be young and weak. But the Battle of Nexar Prime had changed everything. The Karathi lost half their fleet in a single day. Now they had no choice but to ask for help. Standing near the back of the bridge was Vethel, the Karathi liaison assigned to their ship. He was massive, his blue-green scales catching the light whenever he moved. His 4 eyes watched everything with cold judgment. He had barely spoken since coming aboard 3 days ago. Harmon knew Vethel saw this assignment as punishment, a shameful duty to work with lesser beings. "Captain," said Ensign Nate Reyes from the communication station. He was a young pilot, only 22, with messy brown hair and an eager smile. "I'm picking up a distress signal. It's coming from a Karathi civilian transport about 2 hours off our current path." Vethal stepped forward immediately. "We must maintain our course. The defensive line at Sorrel is our priority. One transport is not worth the delay." Harmon turned to look at the Karathi warrior. "How many people are on that transport?" "Approximately 3,000 civilians," Vethal answered. "But our mission is clear. High Commander Sirith ordered us to reinforce the nebula. We cannot waste time on rescue operations." Katie pulled up the sensor data on the main screen. The image showed a large civilian ship, its engines damaged, drifting in space. 3 Varax hunter-killer ships circled it like sharks around wounded prey. Even as they watched, weapons fire struck the transport's hull. "They're dying right now," Katie said quietly. Harmon looked at the screen for a long moment. 3,000 lives. Mothers, fathers, children. They had done nothing wrong except exist in the path of monsters. "Change course," Harmon ordered. "Maximum speed to the transport." Vethel's scales shifted color, showing his anger. "This is against protocol. You are risking our mission for strangers who are not even your own species." Harmon turned to face him directly. His voice was calm but firm. "We don't leave people behind. Not ours, not yours, not anyone's. That's not who we are." The Karathi warrior stared at him, confusion mixing with frustration in his 4 eyes. He did not understand. His people valued honor and duty above all else. Self-preservation was considered wisdom. Why would these short-lived creatures risk everything for aliens they had never met? The relentless dawn changed course and accelerated. Down in the fighter bay, pilots ran to their ships. Sergeant Danny Cole gathered his ground troops, checking weapons and armor. Danny was a big man with a shaved head and scars on his hands from years of combat. He had lost his wife and daughter when the Varax attacked Earth's outer colonies. He had nothing left except the fight. "Listen up," Danny told his soldiers. "We're going to save some Karathi civilians. I don't care what they look like or what language they speak. Today, they're family. We protect family. Understood?" "Yes, Sergeant," the soldiers shouted back. The relentless dawn dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the transport. The three Varak ships immediately turned toward them. They were ugly things, all sharp angles and black metal, designed only for killing. "All fighters launch," Harmon commanded. "Katie, target the lead ship. Let's show them what humans can do." The battle began with fire and fury. Human fighters poured from the relentless dawn like angry hornets. Nate Reyes flew at the front, his small ship dancing between enemy weapons fire. The Varaks were not used to this kind of fighting. Most species were careful, defensive. Humans attacked with wild aggression that seemed almost insane. Katie coordinated the assault with cold precision. She found weaknesses in the Varaks' formations and exploited them. The main guns of the relentless dawn tore through the first hunter-killer, splitting it in half. But the Varaks fought back hard. Human fighters exploded in the darkness. Good pilots, brave souls, gone in an instant. Yet the others kept fighting. Vethalal watched from the bridge, unable to believe what he was seeing. The humans were outgunned and outnumbered. By Karathi military thinking, they should retreat and save themselves. Instead, they pushed harder. They fought with a ferocity that seemed to come from something deeper than training. "The second ship is moving toward the transport," Katie reported. "They're going to ram it." "I see it." Nate's voice came through the radio. "I'm on it." Harmon saw what the young pilot was doing. "Reyes, no. Pull back." But Nate was already flying straight at the Varak ship. His fighter was too small to stop it with weapons. So he aimed for the engine intake, the one vulnerable spot on the enemy vessel. "Tell my mom I did something that mattered," Nate said softly. His fighter disappeared into the Varak's engine. A moment later, the entire ship exploded in a ball of orange fire. The transport was saved. Silence fell over the bridge. Harmon lowered his head. Another good person gone. Another empty seat in the mess hall. The third Varak ship tried to flee, but Katie would not let it escape. The relentless dawn hunted it down and destroyed it without mercy. When the battle ended, the stars were filled with burning wreckage. Vethel stood frozen, his mind struggling to understand. A human had just willingly died for Karathi civilians. Strangers, aliens, people he had never met and never would meet. Why? Vethel asked. His voice was barely a whisper. Why would he do that? Harmon looked at the Karathi warrior with tired, sad eyes. Because that's what we do. That's who we are. We take care of each other. All of us. For the first time since coming aboard, Vethel had no response. He simply stood there, watching the human captain mourn a young pilot who had given everything for people not his own. And somewhere deep in his ancient warrior heart, something began to change. The medical bay of the relentless dawn was full of wounded Karathi. They lay on beds too small for their massive bodies, their scales dull with pain and blood. Dr. Laura Patterson moved between them like a ghost, her white coat stained with fluids of colors she had never seen before joining this mission. Laura was a small woman with gentle hands and eyes that never showed fear. She had been a doctor for 20 years, and she had learned that all living things felt pain the same way. It did not matter if they had scales or skin, 2 eyes or 4. Suffering was universal. "Doctor, we're running out of Karathi blood supplies," her assistant said. "We have maybe enough for 3 more patients." Laura looked around the room. There were at least 15 wounded Karathi who needed transfusions. Without blood, they would die. She thought for a moment, then made a decision that would have seemed crazy to anyone else. "Human blood," she said. "Type O negative. It's risky, but the proteins are similar enough. Get me every volunteer who's willing to donate." Within an hour, human crew members were lying on beds next to Karathi patients, tubes connecting their arms. Their blood flowed into alien bodies, red mixing with blue. It was dangerous. It should not have worked. But somehow it did. Bethel came to the medical bay looking for information about his wounded soldiers. He stopped at the doorway, unable to understand what he was seeing. Humans were giving their own blood to save Karathi lives. "What is this?" he asked. Laura did not look up from her work. She was stitching a deep wound on a Karathi warrior's shoulder. "This is medicine. This is what we do. But you are weakening yourselves, giving your own life force to strangers." Laura finally stopped and looked at him. Her face was gray with exhaustion. She had not slept in 30 hours. They're not strangers anymore. They're people who needed help. That makes them family. Bethel watched as a young human woman with red hair laughed with the Karathi warrior next to her. They could not speak the same language, but she was making silly faces to distract him from the needle in his arm. The Karathi warrior, a soldier who had fought in 100 battles, was actually smiling. In another part of the ship, a different kind of observation was taking place. Thara's a Vellani diplomat, one of the ethereal beings who could sense emotions and thoughts. Her people had always found humans uncomfortable to be around. They were too loud, too emotional, too intense. Being near humans was like standing next to a bonfire. But now, Thera was beginning to understand that fire differently. She sat in the observation room, watching the crew work together. She felt their grief for the pilot they had lost. She felt their determination to keep going despite their pain. She felt something else too, something she had never encountered before in all her centuries of life. It was hope. But not the gentle hope of her own people, who waited patiently for good things to happen. This was aggressive hope. Fierce hope. Hope that grabbed the universe by the throat and demanded better. Thyra wrote her report to the Coalition Council with trembling hands. "I have discovered something important about humans. They do not fight because they believe they will win. They fight because they cannot accept doing nothing. They would rather die trying than live having given up. This makes them dangerous. This also makes them invaluable." Captain Harmon found time to visit every wounded Karathi in the medical bay. He did not speak their language, but he sat beside each one and nodded respectfully. He made sure they knew they were not forgotten. When he reached the family members of those who had been rescued from the transport, he bowed his head. "I'm sorry we could not save everyone," he said through a translator. "We tried." A Karathi female, holding her young child, reached out and touched Harmon's hand. Her 4 eyes were wet with tears. "You came. No one else came. Only humans came." Those words spread through the rescued survivors. Humans came. When no one else would, humans came. Danny Cole worked alongside his soldiers to make repairs to damaged sections of the ship. They worked without rest, pushing their bodies beyond normal limits. A Karathi engineer watched them with amazement. "Why do you not stop?" the engineer asked. "You need rest. Your bodies are fragile." Danny wiped sweat from his forehead and kept welding a broken pipe. "We'll rest when the job is done. Right now, there are people counting on us. Tired is just a feeling. We can ignore feelings when we have to." The engineer had never considered this. His people followed strict schedules of work and rest. The idea of simply choosing to ignore physical limitations was foreign to him. "Does it not hurt?" he asked. "Everything hurts," Danny admitted. "But pain is just information. It tells you something is wrong. It doesn't tell you to quit." Lavra finally collapsed at hour 36. She had saved 17 Karathi lives, performed 4 surgeries, and supervised dozens of blood transfusions. When her assistant found her sleeping on the floor between 2 beds, he tried to wake her. "Leave her," a Karathi patient said. His voice was weak but firm. "That woman is a warrior, greater than any I have known. Let her rest. We will watch over her." And they did. The wounded Karathi took turns staying awake, making sure no one disturbed the small human doctor who had given everything to save them. It was a strange sight. Massive alien warriors protecting a sleeping human female. But it felt right. Bethel reported everything to High Commander Sirith through a secure channel. He described the battle, the rescue, the young pilot's sacrifice, and the doctor's endless compassion. He described humans giving their blood to save alien lives. There was silence from Sirith for a long moment. Then the old commander spoke. "I have been fighting for 300 years. I have seen species rise and fall. I have watched empires crumble. But I have never heard of anything like what you describe. Continue your observations. Tell me everything. These humans may be more important than any of us realized." Bethel looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Varaks were gathering their forces. Somewhere out there, the final battles of this war would be fought. And for the first time since this war began, Bethel felt something he had almost forgotten. He felt hope, not the calm acceptance of fate that his people practiced. Something wilder. Something that burned. He realized it was human hope. He had caught it from them like a fever. And strangely, he did not want it to go away. The relentless dawn continued its journey toward the Sural Nebula. Behind them, 3,000 Karathi civilians were alive because humans had refused to look away. Ahead of them, the greatest challenge still waited, but they were no longer just allies of convenience. Something deeper had formed. Something that would change the galaxy forever. Callan Station was the greatest fortress in Coalition space. It orbited a dead world at the edge of Karathi territory, a massive structure of metal and stone that had never been conquered. Its walls were thick enough to stop any weapon. Its shields could hold against a fleet. Everyone believed Callan Station was unbreakable. They were wrong. The Varaks came with 300 ships. The Coalition had expected 100. By the time scouts reported the true numbers, it was too late to run. Admiral Chris Davenport, who commanded the human Third Fleet, had not yet arrived with reinforcements. They were 72 hours away. Callan Station had to hold. Captain Harmon stood in the command center next to High Commander Sirith. The old Karathi leader was massive, even by his species standards. His scales dark with age, his 4 eyes showing centuries of experience. He had never lost a battle. He did not intend to start now. "The first wave is approaching," Katie reported. "Impact in 20 minutes. The battle began with fire falling from the sky. Vorak ships threw themselves at the station's shields like insects against glass. Many died, but there were always more. The shields began to weaken. Commander Ben Torres, Harmon's second in command, coordinated the defense from the secondary bridge. He was a practical man who believed in simple solutions. Rotate shield frequencies every 30 seconds. Make them work for every inch. For 6 hours they held. Then the shields failed in Sector 7. Varak soldiers poured through the breach like water through a broken dam. They were terrible things to look at. Creatures with too many legs and mouths full of sharp teeth. They felt no fear and knew no mercy. They existed only to kill and consume. Danny Cole was waiting for them. "Hold the line," he shouted, his rifle firing in steady bursts. "Nobody gets through. Nobody." His soldiers fought beside him, human and Karathi together for the first time. Private Megan Shaw, the youngest medic in Danny's unit, was everywhere at once. She was small, barely 5 feet tall, but she moved through the chaos like a dancer. She dragged wounded soldiers to safety, applied bandages under fire, and sometimes picked up a weapon and fought alongside the others. A Karathi warrior fell beside her, his leg torn by Varak's claws. He was twice her size, but she grabbed him and started pulling him toward cover. "Leave me," the warrior said. "Save yourself." "That's not how this works." Megan replied through gritted teeth. "We don't leave anyone behind. Not ever." She got into safety. Then she went back for another. The fighting in the corridors was brutal and close. There was no room for tactics, only survival. Danny ran out of ammunition for his rifle and switched to his pistol. When that was empty, he drew his knife. When his knife broke, he used his fists. A Vorax soldier lunged at him, its claws aiming for his throat. Then a blade flashed in the darkness, and the creature fell dead. Lethal stood behind it, his sword dripping with alien blood. "You fight well for a short-lived creature," Lethal said. Danny laughed despite everything. "You're not so bad yourself, tall guy." They fought back-to-back after that, human and Karathi, covering each other without words. A bond formed in that bloody corridor that would never break. They were no longer just allies. They were brothers. High Commander Sirith watched the reports coming in from across the station. The situation was desperate. More breaches were forming. Ammunition was running low. Casualties were mounting. He began planning a tactical retreat, saving what could be saved. Then Captain Harmon spoke. "Let us hold the main breach. The Relentless Dawn's crew will buy time for evacuation." Sirith stared at him. "That would be suicide. You cannot possibly survive." Harmon nodded. "Probably not. But if we hold that corridor, everyone else has a chance to get out. Isn't that worth it? Your species is too rare, too valuable. You cannot afford such losses." Harmon smiled sadly. "Commander, we didn't come here to survive. We came here to make sure everyone else does. That's just how humans work. We can't help it." The Karathi commander was silent for a long moment. In 300 years of war, he had seen many acts of courage. But this was different. This was not glory-seeking or battle fever. This was simple, clear-eyed sacrifice. These humans knew they were going to die, and they had made peace with it. "Very well," Sirith said quietly. "May your ancestors welcome you with honor. We'll make them proud." Harmon replied. The humans of the Relentless Dawn held the main breach for 19 hours. 19 hours of constant fighting. 19 hours of blood and fire and screaming darkness. They built barricades from broken machines and dead enemies. They took turns sleeping in 10-minute shifts. They shared their last food and water without complaint. Katie Brennan became a legend that night. A Vorax acid bomb flew toward the temporary hospital where wounded soldiers were being treated. If it landed, hundreds would die in agony. Katie calculated the angles in her head. The chance of shooting it down was almost nothing. She took the shot anyway. The bomb exploded in midair, spraying acid harmlessly against the ceiling. Katie lowered her rifle with shaking hands. Around her, soldiers stared in disbelief. "Lucky shot," she said. It was not luck. It was skill born from desperation. It was human stubbornness refusing to accept the impossible. Dr. Lavra Patterson set up medical station in the middle of the fighting. Bullets and claws flew around her, but she kept working. She saved 47 lives that night, human and Karathi alike. When a Vorax soldier broke through the line and charged at her, she stabbed it with a surgical tool without looking up from her current patient. "Some people have no manners," she muttered, and kept stitching. As the 19th hour ended, the reinforcements finally arrived. Admiral Davenport's fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel and immediately engaged the Vorax. Fresh soldiers poured into Callan Station. The enemy began to retreat. When the battle finally ended, only 43 humans from the Relentless Dawn's crew were still standing. They had started with over 300. High Commander Sirith came to the breach personally. He walked through the corridors where humans had fought and died, seeing the bodies of enemies piled high, seeing the blood that stained every surface. He found Captain Harmon sitting against a wall. Too tired to stand, Sirith knelt beside him. a gesture he had never made to anyone outside his own species. "What you did today will never be forgotten," the old commander said. "You have shown us what courage truly means. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. For others, for strangers, for people you will never meet." Harmon looked up with exhausted eyes. "Just doing our job, Commander. Just being human." Sirith bowed his head. "Then to be human is to be something extraordinary." Across Callan Station, in a dozen languages, the story began to spread. Humans held the breach. Humans never gave up. Humans died so others could live. And slowly, quietly, the galaxy began to change. The word spread faster than light could travel. Stories of Callan Station reached every corner of Coalition space within days. Species that had never cared about humans before suddenly wanted to know everything. Who were these creatures? Where did they come from? How could beings so fragile be so fierce? Admiral Chris Davenport stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Iron Promise, watching his fleet gather for the counterattack. He was an older man with silver hair and calm blue eyes that had seen the worst the universe could offer. He had been fighting since he was 18 years old. Now, at 62, he was about to lead the largest combined fleet in galactic history. Ships from 6 different species flew in formation around the human vessels. Korathi warships with their curved hulls and powerful cannons. Vellani cruisers that seemed to shimmer like ghosts. Thalan destroyers covered in living armor. Others that Davenport could not even name. They had all come because of what happened at Callan Station. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving requests from non-human vessels. They want to serve under your direct command." Davenport raised an eyebrow. This was unheard of. Different species always commanded their own ships. The idea of aliens following human orders was simply not done. "Why?" he asked. "They say." The officer paused, clearly surprised by what he was reading. "They say they want to learn. They want to fight like humans." Tyler Grant was a young pilot who had watched the recordings of Ensign Nate Ray's final flight 100 times. He had memorized every move, every word. Nate had become his hero, a symbol of everything a human pilot should be. Now Tyler was preparing to lead his own squadron into battle. "Listen up," he told his pilots. "The Varax think they're going to win this war. They think we're weak because we're small and we don't live very long. They're wrong. We're going to show them that every day of a human life counts more than a century of theirs. We fight with everything we have. We never stop. We never quit. For Nate, for everyone we've lost, for everyone we're going to save." Admiral Davenport's strategy was something no other species would attempt. Instead of meeting the Varax fleet head-on, he planned to use small, fast teams to strike at their command structure. It required individual ships to make split-second decisions without waiting for orders. It required trust in every pilot and captain. It required the kind of wild, aggressive thinking that humans did naturally. The battle began at dawn, as measured by Earth Standard Time. 300 human fighters launched toward the Varax formation, followed by allied ships from a dozen worlds. They moved like a swarm, changing direction suddenly, splitting and reforming in patterns the enemy could not predict. The Varax were confused. They had fought many species, and all of them were predictable. They formed lines. They followed protocols. They retreated when losses became too heavy. Humans did none of these things. Tyler Grant led his squadron directly into the enemy's heart. They passed through defensive screens that should have destroyed them, dancing between weapons fire with movements that seemed almost impossible. Their goal was the Varax flagship, a massive ship that carried the Hive Queen's primary communication nexus. If they could destroy it, the entire enemy fleet would fall into chaos. "I'm hit," one of his pilots shouted. Engine's gone. Keep flying, Tyler ordered. Use momentum. You don't need an engine to aim. The damaged fighter continued forward, its pilot using the last of his power to steer toward the flagship's hangar bay. When Tyler and his remaining squadron reached the opening, they found their wounded friend had cleared the path, crashing into the defense turrets and taking them offline. He's alive, Tyler said, checking his sensors. Emergency beacons active. We're getting him out of there. They fought through the interior of the enemy flagship on foot. Human pilots with pistols and grenades against Virac soldiers who had never faced anything like them. The aliens were stronger, faster, better armed. But the humans would not stop coming. Tyler reached the communication nexus himself. It was a massive organic structure, pulsing with sickly light. Around it, elite Virac guards waited. There were too many to fight. I need 2 minutes, Tyler told his team. Hold them. His pilots formed a wall between him and the enemy. They knew they probably would not survive. They did not hesitate. Tyler planted the explosives with steady hands. Behind him, he heard the sounds of fighting, of humans dying to buy him time. He thought of Nate Rees, who had flown his fighter into an engine to save strangers. He thought of his parents back on Earth, who had never wanted him to join the military. He thought of all the people across the galaxy who were counting on him. 2 minutes, he whispered. You got 2 minutes. The explosion destroyed the Nexus completely. Across space, Virac ships suddenly stopped coordinating. They began attacking each other, confused by the silence where orders used to be. The Coalition fleet surged forward, pressing their advantage. Tyler and 3 surviving pilots managed to escape the flagship before it was destroyed. They recovered their wounded friend from the wreckage and flew back to the Iron Promise with enemy ships burning all around them. On Callan Station, Vethel watched the battle unfold on the tactical display. He saw human ships taking risks that his people would never consider. He saw them succeeding through sheer audacity and will. And when the Virac's flagship exploded, he made a decision. He walked to where Captain Harmon was resting, still recovering from the battle in the corridors. The human commander looked up with tired eyes. Vethal, something wrong? The Karathi warrior knelt before him, a gesture of deep respect. From his belt, he drew a ceremonial knife and offered it, handle first. I name you Blade Brother, Vethel said formally. From this day until the last day, your enemies are my enemies. Your honor is my honor. Your people are my people. Harmon stared at the knife. He knew enough about Karathi culture to understand what this meant. No non-Karathi had ever received this title. It was the highest honor a warrior could give. I don't know if I deserve this, Harmon said quietly. You do, Vethel replied. You have shown me what true courage looks like. Not fighting for glory or territory or survival. Fighting for others. Fighting because you cannot accept a universe where suffering goes unanswered. This is worthy of eternal honor. On the world of Ithar Prime, where the Coalition Council gathered, Elder Morith of the Villani addressed the assembled representatives. She was ancient, even by her species standards, her form barely solid. Her thoughts touching millions of minds at once. We have long wondered what makes humans unique, she said, her voice echoing in every mind present. They are not the strongest. They are not the oldest. They do not have the best technology or the largest numbers. But they have something else. Something we have forgotten. She paused, and every being in the chamber leaned forward. They refused to accept limits. On hope, on courage, on sacrifice. When we say something is impossible, they try anyway. When we count the cost and withdraw, they spend themselves freely. They make those around them believe that the impossible is merely difficult. And in believing it, they make it true. The battle ended with the Viracs in full retreat. They had lost their flagship, their coordination, and something more important. They had lost their certainty. For the first time in their history, they had met a species that scared them. As the coalition fleet gathered to celebrate, something remarkable happened. Ships from every species arranged themselves around the human vessels, not as allies, as guards, as protectors. They had come to help humanity. Now they understood that fighting alongside humanity was the greatest honor the galaxy could offer. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Callan Station. The Varax's dominion was broken, their fleets scattered across dead space, their conquered worlds liberated one by one. 47 star systems now flew coalition flags where once only Vorax hive symbols had existed. The war was not over, but victory was no longer in doubt. Captain Jack Harmon stood before the Grand Assembly on Ethera Prime. The chamber was vast, designed to hold representatives from 100 species. Today, it was full. Beings of every shape and color sat in rising tiers. Their attention focused on the small group of humans standing in the center. Behind Harmon stood the survivors of the relentless dawn. There were fewer of them now than when they had started. Dr. Lavra Patterson, her hands still gentle despite everything they had done. Lieutenant Katie Brennan, whose impossible shot had saved hundreds of lives. Sergeant Danny Cole, the scars on his body telling stories of courage that words could never capture. Private Megan Shaw, who had dragged wounded soldiers twice her size through fire and blood. Commander Ben Torres, steady as always, the rock that held everything together. They looked tired. They looked worn. They looked like heroes, even though none of them thought of themselves that way. The chamber fell silent as High Commander Sirith rose to speak. His voice, translated into 100 languages, filled the space like thunder. When this war began, we of the Karathi thought ourselves the greatest warriors in the galaxy. We had never asked for help. We believed we needed none. He paused, his 4 eyes moving across the assembly. We were fools. A murmur ran through the crowd. The Karathi never admitted weakness. This was unprecedented. The humans came when no one else would, Sirith continued. They bled when others hid. They died when others fled. Not for glory, not for territory, not for wealth. They died for strangers, for people they had never met, for people who had looked down on them as primitive and short-lived. He turned to face Harmon directly. I have fought for 300 years. I have seen species rise and fall. I have watched empires crumble to dust. But I have never seen anything like what these humans have shown us. They taught us that true strength is not measured in weapons or years of life. It is measured in the willingness to stand for others, to protect the weak, to fight the darkness even when hope is gone. Vethal stepped forward next. He still carried the ceremonial knife at his belt, the same one he had offered to Harmon a year ago. His voice was rough with emotion. I was sent to serve with humans as punishment. I expected to find weakness. Instead, I found the greatest warriors I have ever known. Not because they are strong or fast or numerous. Because they are true. Because their hearts do not know how to quit. Because when they say they will protect you, they mean it with every fiber of their being. He placed his fist over his heart. A Karathi gesture of absolute respect. To fight alongside humanity is not merely an alliance. It is an honor that will echo through generations. My children's children will speak of Captain Jack Harmon. They will tell stories of Danny Cole holding the breach with nothing but his fists. They will sing songs of Ensign Nate Rias, who flew into death so that strangers might live. Elder Morath of the Villani spoke next, her ethereal form shimmering with ancient light. We who sense emotions have long found humans overwhelming. Their feelings burned too bright, too fierce. We did not understand. She smiled, a rare expression for her kind. Now we do. That fire is not a weakness. It is their gift to the universe. They love with such intensity that they cannot bear to see others suffer. They hope with such power that the impossible bends before them. They are not reckless. They are brave in a way we had forgotten how to be. One by one, representatives from other species rose to speak. The Thalan, whose living ships had fought beside human vessels. The small, clever Nixari, who had watched everything with their calculating minds and concluded that humans were the most valuable allies in the galaxy. Others whose names human tongues could barely pronounce, all of them saying the same thing. Humans had changed everything. Finally, the moment came for Harmon to speak. He had never wanted this attention. He was a ship captain, not a politician. He was tired and sad and still grieving for everyone they had lost. But his crew was watching. The galaxy was watching. He had to say something. "We didn't do anything special," he said, his voice quiet but carrying through the silent chamber. "We just did what humans do. We looked out for each other. All of us, every species, every soul." He looked at the faces around him, alien and strange, and yet somehow not strange at all anymore. That's what family does. You don't ask what color someone is, or how many legs they have, or how long they're going to live. When family is in trouble, you help. When family is hurting, you comfort. When family is threatened, you fight. That's all we did. We treated everyone like family. He paused, thinking of Nate Reyes, of all the others who had not survived to see this day. We lost a lot of good people. People who believed that protecting others was worth more than protecting themselves. I wish they could be here to see what their sacrifice built. A galaxy that stands together. Species that used to be strangers now fighting side by side. That's what they died for. That's what they made possible. When he finished speaking, no one clapped. No one cheered. Instead, every being in the chamber rose to their feet. They stood in silence, a gesture of reverence that transcended language and culture. The Coalition Grand Council made their announcement. Earth was now designated a protected cradle world, a status previously reserved only for the homeworlds of the three eldest species. Any attack on Earth would be considered an attack on the entire coalition. Any threat to humanity would be met with the full force of a united galaxy. That it was not a gift. It was a recognition of what humanity had proven. They had earned it with blood and sacrifice and love. Later that night, Harmon stood alone on a balcony overlooking the celebration below. He could hear music from a dozen cultures mixing together, see species dancing who had never learned each other's names a year ago. The universe felt different now, smaller, more connected. Danny Cole joined him, 2 glasses of something strong in his hands. "You did good, Captain," Danny said, offering him a drink. "We all did," Harmon replied. "I just wish more of us were here to see it." Danny nodded. "They're here, somewhere, watching, probably laughing at us for being so serious." Harmon smiled despite his sadness. "Probably." They stood together as the stars wheeled overhead. Somewhere out there, the remnants of the Varax were hiding, licking their wounds. Someday, there would be more battles, more sacrifice, more loss, but also more victory, more connection, more family. In the years that followed, a new tradition spread across coalition space. Before every battle, warriors of every species spoke the same phrase in their own tongue. The words were translated from English, the language of a small, young species that had taught the galaxy what courage really meant. Stand beside humanity. Fight with honor. Leave no one behind. And on the memorial wall of Callan Station, among thousands of names carved in dozens of scripts, the words of Ensign Nate Reyes remained. Pilots from every species touched those words before going into battle, asking for his blessing. "Tell my mom I did something that mattered." He did. They all did. And because of them, the stars themselves would never be the same. The war ended 2 years later. The Voraks surrendered unconditionally, their hive queens bowing before a coalition that had learned to stand united. At the treaty signing, representatives from every species agreed on one thing. None of it would have been possible without humanity, without their refusal to give up, without their fierce, impossible, beautiful belief that every life mattered. Fighting alongside humanity brought honor and reverence across the stars. Forever.